How about now? Alright. Yeah, so this is my back office. This is my back office. It's just my way of trying to keep tabs on everything. So we can look back at, well, we don't have to do a date. We can go by various configurations. You can ignore the markup piece of this because there's no way to match the two. But so far I'm like 96% with the Mako. And then, of course, again, you skip that stuff. And that's my positive and negative run rate. So about a third of all my runs are positive. Pretty sure that's not how that weapon's supposed to be. Let me open up the Twitch chat. So what we can see here in this graph is obviously a upward trend, and of course here are all events that I've kept up with to determine, you know, if certain things improve the returns. And this is just your general data kind of normalizing. I intend to do a logarithmic graph that would more show kind of like this as it starts narrowing a convergence point, which is ultimately how all of this operates anyway. This is the proverbial sine wave comments that are on the forums. That'll be more evident there. And in this period from about January to right here, where I hit 80, I didn't use the Mako at all. I was using the Niflhelm. And you can see here, this is where I unlock Kill Strike, and then that's when I changed from the Niflhelm and the Mako. Actually, somewhere in here I got a Hoff, which I need to catalog all of my hunting Ubers. It's not going to be that difficult because I've only had about like 3 of them, so you can see when I've had those. I haven't had one since. It's been probably middle of March, and there's been probably 400,000 ped cycled, and that's been with that Mako weapon. And you can see from here to here is when I hit level 85 because I chipped in Kill Strike, and there's already that upward trend. I think in general, if I had used the Mako, I think we would have seen from here to here just an upward trend, but it's flat like this with a sudden increase because I didn't use the Mako at all. And then this is when I changed from that XLR Julian to the Predator to use to do more pre-damage, and of course that's maxed. So you again saw an upward trend because I'm not leaking PEDs as much. And that's when I hit 88, so it's been about a month and a half. And then it was a further uptrend. Again, I'm using Mako, so you would expect that, right? And then that's when I hit 90, and then I started changing gear, and then it's kind of flatlined since then. And actually, it's more of a downtrend. And then what you kind of saw in terms of a candlestick, if you're familiar with candlesticks, while as Sokolade pointed out, it is probably a gay act, that is not what I'm referring to. You can just see a never-ending downward trend, and you can see the gap in which I didn't use the Mako. That's the brakes here. I used it once here, which didn't go over very well. So if I move it a bit further, this is just a downward downward stair step. And this kind of leads me to believe my theory on PED leaking to be actually true. Because that is not how my mining graph looks. It does not look like that. You see you have small gains here, the transparent and green bars, but you see very negative bars, and they don't recoup. Yeah, it would be a stock that I would short for sure. That it's pretty evident. And to be honest with you, you kind of have to treat it that way. You have to treat it as if you are your own stock. And needless to say, from a TT perspective, I'm not doing very well. But from a percentage, because that's not the whole picture, from a percentage standpoint, I'm doing okay. It's just not, 96 is not a very, you need 104.5 average markup, and that's very difficult. Now, Niflhelm, so we'll go with the X. That one, although I have been always maxed, I didn't have much cycled. That's probably a month's worth. That's not a very good return rate, but I'm maxed. And my positive rate was not very good either. It was a lot worse, so about 1 in 4 runs were positive. Yeah, that's a beautiful graph. Let's put things in a little bit more perspective here. So that's pretty much a flat line. That's what I would expect from a max weapon, is a flat line. When I've had them, yeah. So at this point is when I changed from an 8 to an X. That's just a milestone, and I turned 80 there. And my candlestick. That one here is the Meng Chang Hoff I had. This was actually the last Hoff, so it's actually been March, April, May, June, 4 months since my last 1K plus. So it's actually probably more like 600,000 pit cycled. And then the mod 8. Higher eco, there's more cycled too, but about 96%. Higher, about 6% additional positive rate, but still about 1 in 3. And this one is a bit more in line with also, again, what I would expect with that eco. We can take care of the data normalization part here. General uptrend. And so what I have not pointed out here is the point in which I got the mod resto chip. And that's about right here. And you can see that it kind of, this is a general, if I could do, I do here. I can actually do, I can do a trend line. And that's when I changed amps. candlestick, same thing. I would imagine for anybody, really, unless you are either Swedish, you played in non-US time, just tinfoil hat, but um, everybody's everybody's um, candlestick graph would look similarly. It's just generally varying on the grade of decline. Then I'll show. I think I have enough data for that. So if you remember last year, there are so yeah, there is no value to skills. Skills are worthless. There is no TT value of skills. It's in the ESI. So I'm actually removing that from um, my monthly reports because of that realization that skills don't have any value. It is solely markup, and the TT of it is extracted by the TT of the ESI. Plus, or sorry, minus 10% to Mind Art for decay. Yeah, so last year I had the IMK2. So I had the IMK2, the hypercharged MK1 scope, MK2 sight. Now, mind you, I kind of wish I still had that, but I don't. It's not necessarily a bad thing that I'm doing melee. It's fine, but I had that, and I haven't graphed into when I got the sights and scopes, but obviously, as you can see, it really mattered very little. There was definitely a PED leak, 92.5%, and I had 5,600 PED in defensive cost. Again, you'll have to ignore this because it's not true. And I had a 1 in 4 positive run rate. And that's what it looked like. It was always very poor. Some of that is because um, I spent a lot of time on Entropia in tax space. Um, in my graphs, I can also show that hunting on taxed land is you're not taxed, you're taxing the pool. It just increases variance. So more negative runs, less positive runs. But if you can hunt on a taxed land while you're having a good or even run, that actually works to your favor. And then you can obviously see this candlestick being a lot steeper. Tax land comment. So in my graph, um, no, all skills have no TT value at all. It is, the value is solely in markup. So tax lands, so we can show this too. So hang on. So this excludes all my LAs because in my LAs I have a negative tax rate since that goes to my favor. So that's going to be excluded in this graph. So this is anytime I hunt on like OLA 49, and no, that's not true either. Every item has a TT value, so that's not true either. So that's when I'm hunting on like the Rex LA or CP or pretty much 80% of Rocktropia. So that's my at 97%, which is about average. 1 and 3. That includes all configurations, so that's when I had the Cali Trek, IMK2, the Mako, Niflhelm, all of the 600,000 items that I've owned over the last 3 years. Detailed graph. So the sample size in this is almost 200,000 ped, which is that's pretty good sample size. I would say I probably needed twice as much. In all my graphs, it's taken about 500,000 ped to see trends. But you can see this is kind of how it's fair. It has evened out to be roughly. I'm probably positive if I were to get back the PEDs and tax, I would have probably had well over 100%. Since on non-taxed I'm about 96, 97, it's really not differed any at all. And this is an interesting candlestick. I don't remember what I was hunting here. I think this is Rocktropia. And then you had big movements here. I don't know what this was either. Guess I can find out. September. 8 coins, looks like. Yeah. Oh, Zombie Kong. Yeah, that's it. That's taxed. Krelton has ultimately whipped my ass, so here's another interesting thing that I'll share. So for the longest time I've had no problem with dropping 10 to 15 ped mining bombs, but I cannot do that. For whatever reason, I can't hunt bigger than 8 ped mobs. And even if I did within about 20 mobs, I'm terrified that I'm going to lose 30,000 ped. I'm sure a lot of people have that fear and reaction. Because this game doesn't operate in law of independent trials, I'm mentally having difficulty trying to get past the randomness of the game. And so if I were to what I've learned is by doing small runs, 500 ped, so some people say that you test the water of the mob to see if it's actually going to put out. Kind of feel the loot, have a crystal ball, which I think is total bullshit. I have learned that I inevitably sprinkle peds everywhere, and I have ultimately no way to get that back. I just sprinkle it for other people to get. Whereas if you sit on a mob, it may start off bad, but that's like any crafting run or any mining run. And, maybe 100 mobs in, loot starts to warm up and things start evening out. And so if I were to say, if my min cycle was, let's say, 1,000 ped, I am 89% TT. So because I do less than 1,000 ped in any place, that's my TT return. And I don't think so. Anytime someone says that I'm getting 50% returns and 60% returns, uh, one, they don't understand the turnover effect. So you may be 50% on your PED card, but it's probably 95%. You've just cycled a lot. Or you go to, say, these Molmen and do a 500 PED run. Well, yeah, you're probably likely going to get, 40, 50, 60% return. So this obviously shows that it's not a good idea. And so 22% of mine have been positive, which is usually it's a small cycle because um, it's bad, and so I've hopped around. And the graph just looks like this. It's pretty poor. It's still an upward trend, but a lot of this is because of rings and eco of gear, but it's still piss. And that's a very, very, very steep candlestick, steep decline. But let's say 2,000 to 5,000. I am 96%. And 1 in 3 positive runs. Pretty flat, pretty constant, 95 to 96. Candlestick. And we can go a little further. I haven't really done a run over 12,000 ped. That was with a long tooth. 95.3. Again, about 1 in 3. Much more ped cycled at that rate. Still downtrend, but what are you gonna do? And then I'll show you one more thing, D-matrix, and then I'll close. How about that? This is going to be because I lost about 3,000 ped on Dottie in about a couple days, and I went back to ARC on my LA Sangra and used Emperors, and I had a recovery pretty much. It's still a downtrend, but it obviously that's going to be normalized. And you can see there's that run that I had 900 ped that day, 50 ped that day, 1,000 ped that day, and of course it's going back down. But you can see it's from my LA. I had a really nice run. That was the recovery I assume if it works that way, that's the loss, the 2,900 ped loss coming back. It's not really been that great since then, but I can work with this because at least I have some nice green. I'm not getting that in the Mako right now. And if my math is correct with the Mako and using unmaxed anything, I'm well, I can show this too. Hang on. Yeah, you see the URL, don't try to go there just because it's password protected. This is the math behind the leakage. So this is ultimately my setup. That's bond theory, if anybody knows what that is. That's how this game works. It's a nice thread on PCF about it. And so this is this is where I am unmaxed. So this is the DPP with the sword and amp, but not the buffs. This is how it is unmaxed. So 3.12. So my theory on misses is about 300 peds a month that's lost. That's only on misses. And what's also missed in this is the damage loss. So when everybody thinks about non-SIB, they think about all the misses that you have. What is a problem is the loss of damage. Now, some of it is going to wash because of overkill, but you still lose in overkill from what we think. But take, for example, when I damage enhance my Mako 4 damage enhancers. So let's put this in here. When I do 4 damage enhancers, I lose on the minimum damage 4 damage. If you average that, so let's say it's like 75%, but let's just go with 50%. That's 2 damage lost per swing. It adds up. So if a normal hunt is 10,000 swings, which it usually is, it's more actually if I have more than 3 hours. That's 20,000 damage. That ends up being what? If well, let's do unmaxed because I know that. That's roughly, so it's 2 damage lost. So 50% of that's 1. That's about 10,000 damage that's lost. That's roughly 150 swings at 30 peck a swing. 50 ped. I think I did the math on whatever it ended up being roughly around 70, 80 ped in a hunt lost because of damage. Part of that's going to be swept away in overkill, but you multiply that with crits, and maybe you didn't need that extra swing for a finisher. So that's, pack that could have been saved. And then on top of that, I have a leak rate. Where is it? And so this is with all my buffs. Just on misses, it's a 0.71% miss rate. So with my current level, it's I leak about 6 ped an hour. And if I hunt 10 hours, 60 ped. Multiplied by 30, that's 1,800 ped. And, that's it. It all adds up. And that's just on misses. So in theory, I could be looking at throwing away about 4,000, 5,000 ped in a month just at my current level of 94. At 4 or 5,000 a month. I think I said hour. God, I hope that's not the case. And that's just at 94. You know, when I use this at like the IMK2, which I can actually put this in here. This was the setup I had last year. I didn't have any buffs then. So let's say you think you can use an IMK2 at level 65, which I think Combo said you could. Well, so let's do this. Since you point that out, I used about 5 damage enhancers pretty often. And so, in theory, my base DPP should be 3.164 with the damage enhancers if you include markup. Reason being is that IMK2 really sucks with any enhancer because of the burn rate, and burn rate burns markup, and so that lowers eco. But the base DPP, and remember this is with the MK1 scope and the MK2 sight, is 2.906. So I lose roughly 1600 ped on misses. I actually think it's a lot higher than that, but that's just the formula that I'm using. With buffs, I get it to 2.953. And that means my miss rate would be about 3.5%, and I'd leak about 30 ped an hour. And again, that's just on misses, that's not damage loss. Because it really doesn't, it's just not misses. You have less crits, which covers your evades. And then, of course, there's a huge gap in. You lose 3.5% to your damage. I probably should calculate that in the leaks, but. Yeah, it's a lot of Hoff building for people other than me. That goes to other people, for sure. Unless you get really lucky, which is like never. Yep. Yeah, the Matrix, I don't even get a kiss afterwards. Alright. That's all I have. I'll save this to put in my Mako thread to share. And then everybody can listen to my heavily congested voice at the moment. Yeah, as you can see, I haven't put any entries in for the last 6 days, but as you can see, I'm not doing too well. But we will see, because I'm gonna actually use the Embras from now until 98, level 98, so the next 4 levels, probably maybe through migration. And that way we can definitely see, because it'll be less leak, we can then see over a certain period of time we should see a fairly significant uptick. I'm guessing about 1%, maybe 1.5% in the graph, and that should, to me, that'll mean conclusively that my leak theory is true. And I'll bring up this post. My leak theory is completely based on this post by Slither, which I've kind of always sort of known. So there's a thread that's called Does DPP Really Matter? And the answer to that is it does, but it's not the whole story. So he did a test between two weapons, and this is from a max perspective. This does not have anything to do with unmaxed, but it should still be true. And I can just as easily do that between the Mako and something like those Pirons to differentiate. But in this case, what you can see is he did a test with the Swine Deluxe, which has an eco of 2.058 with the Dante. That's old school eco, so it's this one here. And in his test, he killed 100 mobs on Tax Lion. It's the Huan. And you can see that the average loot, the mean is roughly that. So we'll say 5.8 to 6 ped. Then he did one with a Maxed Marine Stalker, which is almost one full DPP higher. And the mean is somewhere between 4.5. And so ultimately multipliers get applied to this. And this just shows that eco is a condition slider. But if you're unmaxed, it becomes a leak. So the Mako, with me being unmaxed, operates as if I'm maxed. So my average loot maybe in this case would be, let's say, 3.8 ped. We'll just say that, which is probably true. My multipliers are going to be based on that 3.8, or a combination of, because I used a finisher and taggers and whatever. So I'm not going to get an adjustment because I'm unmaxed. All those misses, all that damage lost is just spilled. Whether it goes to Mindark or it goes into the loot pool, I have no idea. My guess is the latter, because everywhere I go I sprinkle peds and somebody else picks it up. On my LA, on Dottie's, on just everything. And so I'm not getting HOFs that compensates for... I'm not getting any HOFs to compensate for those, those unmaxed hits and swings. But that's what my ped leak theory is based on. It's just this post, and this is true. Alright, that's all I got. Thanks for watching.